Pardon?
Did it have a water wheel near there? Was that the one?
Yeah, there was a water wheel on the creek in there, and a little bridge right alongside the water wheel. And the water wheel operated a pump to irrigate the farm. Sometime in the late 1930s, some kid was going to pull a smart trick and went in there and jammed a plank in the water wheel. Well, he jammed a plank in it all right, but he was standing downstream and the plank caught him and shoved him underwater, and that was the end of him. And of course, there was a huge lawsuit, and the water wheel was taken out.
What was the name of that farm again? The fellows there?
It was Armstrong's farm.
Yeah, it was Armstrong's. And he called it the Monte Vista Farm because it was as soon as you came past Dianza Road, in a clear day, it's a beautiful view of the mountain. I can digress a minute. That's one of my pet peeves, that beautiful mountain being named after an obscure English admiral. Captain Vancouver named a lot of the landmarks around Puget Sound after his crew. But when it came to that mountain, all he was doing was playing politics in the British Navy, because he named that mountain after an admiral, and an admiral can put in a good word for a captain with the powers that be, you know. But
well, I've been insulted by the Tacoma Rainiers too.
yeah, well, the way I look at it, Seattle could have their brewery and let it go at that, but there was the legislation in Congress to officially change the name of the mountain back to Mount Tacoma, but the Seattle Chamber of Commercialism types couldn't abide anything with the name Tacoma on it, and they were able to block the legislation.
The Rainiers used to be Seattle
Tragedy.
Rainiers.
But anyway,
They don't belong in Tacoma.
further along Driveway Lake Drive, there was just the visitation villa that was the Catholic girls' school. There was a very scenic pond on that property. It had a little arched white bridge across it, and it was, I believe that pond was quite seriously damaged scenic-wise when the 1933 flood. Clover Creek ran over and came down across what is now the tennis club and through where the electric power substation is, and across what was all open area then, and down into Ponce de Leon Creek, and took out the bridge. And then, Bob, you were saying it flooded your basement with all the water, but it was Clover Creek also undermined, and the bridge in Dianza Road fell in too. So it was a real problem to find a way around out there. But that's when the Clover Creek eroded the bank so bad that it was under a WPA project. They put sacks of cement in there, and I believe it was just recently that Clover Creek Salmon Restoration Group took all that stuff out and tried to put it back like it was. Originally, you could go down Clover Creek down there by Clover Park. You could pick watercress in the creek and all such things as that. But this pond, and I say it was a very scenic looking thing. And right now would be in the parking lot of the Key Bank and take up part of the Office Depot. And you go farther down Driveway Lake Drive, there was a few little houses down the other side of what is now 100th Street. 100th Street used to be called Lake Steilacoom Avenue, which would have added to the confusion of all the Steilacoom names. The only house of them that's left is Bob would certainly know, is Hal Allen's real estate office. It was a little stucco house at one time. Now, you can't pass up the chance to talk about railroads. I guess the first, or one of the first railroad operations in the Lakewood area was the Union Pacific. The Union Pacific apparently decided to build a separate line from Puget Sound to Portland. Now, they had done a lot of excavating near Jefferson Avenue in Tacoma. They were going to run a tunnel, I guess, to get around going up Gallagher Gulch. But they extended out through the Lakewood area. Now, if you go down on Stilichon Boulevard, between the fire station and the cemetery, you can see an electric transmission line goes diagonally across the old Flint Dairy pasture. You know, close, it's overgrown with blackberries and one thing else. But you can see the remains of the old railroad grade that the Union Pacific put in. They never laid tracks. I guess they went busted in, one of those money panics in the 1893 or something like that. But you could also see remains of that railroad grade on 100th Street. It would have been, I guess maybe 500-600 feet down from where the McDonald's is now. You can see part of that old railroad grade. The old maps show, and I got one here, that shows that would have gone across, diagonally across the Villa Plaza, or Lakewood Mall, and it would have gone between Gravely Lake and Stilichon Lake and across the prairie and down there, and that would have sure made a lot of different appearances in Lakewood. I mentioned Lakewood Mall on occasion. Some of you might find it interesting or might already know it. I mentioned Hudson's Bay Company's Puget Sound Agricultural Society had a farm in this area, and when the boundary between Canada and the United States was established, the Hudson's Bay Company started pulling out, and they abandoned that farm. And the United States government authorized homesteading. There was a certain type of homestead called a donation land claim. A man by the name of August I. Connect filed a donation land claim on what was part of the Hudson's Bay property. Now, the donation land claims were put into effect long before the government surveyors came in and surveyed the whole area into sections, or square mile. So when they did survey it, these donation land claims took priority as far as land descriptions. So to this day, a land description on a donation land claim used that same term. Now, why I mentioned that is the AI Connect donation land claim is now the Lakewood Mall. But I get back to the railroads. Of course, the railroad that most of us remember is the old streetcar line. There was a little steam railroad ran from Tacoma out to Lake City, and the station was somewhere near Martin's Boathouse. It met its demise around the turn of the last century, and Pacific Traction Company took over most of its track, and some of it they relocated, and they ran streetcars, and they abandoned the railroad's station. One of those stations apparently was moved, and it was set down on Ponce de Leon Creek and Gravely Lake Drive. It was there for many years. When we were kids going to Park Lodge, a man by the name of Whittam lived there. You remember Mr. Whittam, a crabby old guy that would boot anybody out that went down there his creek. But the building, somebody later and turned it around, and so it faced Gravely Lake Drive, but it's gone now. There's a bank building on the site. But the streetcar line was, ran from, well, it started from downtown Tacoma, and it ran across the Tacoma Avenue Bridge and out Park Avenue into 54th Street, and came down 54th Street to South Tacoma Way, then out South Tacoma Way and down 66th Street, and went under the railroad tracks. You see at 66, there's two openings under the railroad track. The one on the north side is where the streetcar went through and up to Manitou Park. Now, at Manitou Park, you had to transfer. They had the big streetcar that went that far, and then the little one, the little four-wheel, like people call it the Tudorville, continued on out to here. The line came up what would be Custer Road from Manitou and went across Stilichum Boulevard and across the Prairie, and it went just to the west of the Park Lodge school grounds and across to Alpharetta, and there was a little station there. They had little stations that we called pagodas. They were open-sided. There was just a wall up the center of them and a seat on each side of the wall, but the roofs, the eaves turned up Chinese style. They call them pagodas. The next stop was at Clover Park. There was a pagoda there, and there was also some benches in between the fir trees. And there was a little railroad bridge across Clover Creek. There was a switch. So one branch went up the east side of Nyanza Road and finally curved and went parallel to the Northern Pacific Railroad tracks to Tilichum, or south side. The other branch went up on the side of Gravely Lake Drive, and the next stop was what was called Interlochen. That was at Lake Stilichum Drive. There was a little pagoda there. There was another one at Washington Boulevard. That was called the Arkley Station, no doubt after John R. Arkley. And then it proceeded across the Prairie to the intersection of Edgewood and Veterans Drive. That's right near the Vets Hospital. I will remember a lot of older people laughing about the motorman. Sometimes the streetcar driver was called a motorman, and sometimes he was called a conductor, but usually the motorman. Well, anyway, this one motorman, I believe he was known as, he was a Mr. Beeler. He called Dad Beeler. Dad Beeler allegedly threw chicken feed off of the streetcar on his last run in the evening, and his morning run he had his shotgun with him and popped a couple of pheasants. But it wasn't uncommon to hear shooting in those days, and nobody thought anything about it, you know. Now people get excited. They think the Crips and Bloods are shooting at each other. You know, lots of people kept chickens in the early days, and these big old red-tailed hawks were pretty hard on chickens, and so most people kept a shotgun that had chickens, and they'd shoot hawks and probably the odd crow and one thing and another.
Skunk.
The area was made into a game reserve eventually, and I don't know if there was very much poaching, but you know, you have to admit that a grilled breast of quail on toast is an excellent breakfast. There was no shopping or stores